This is the OnePlus Nord, a budget mid-range £400 phone, but can a budget mid-range £400 phone be any good? OnePlus have gone back to their roots with this phone and have now produced a really good mid-range phone. And it's competing with some other really good mid-range phones like the Pixel 4a. So surely the Nord would have something that would make it stand out amongst this now crowded mid-range market. But I don't think it does. We should start with design though, because that's one thing that I really like about the Nord. If you were buying a OnePlus Nord and had any sense at all, you'd pick up Blue Marble. I really like it, it's different and it stands out amongst all the other phones that you can get. The back of the phone has that glossy finish, so sometimes it can be a little bit slippery, but you get that case in the box if it is a bit too slippery for you. One thing that this phone doesn't have though is wireless charging, which maybe is a bit of a disappointment, but it does come with OnePlus's 30-watt warp charging, which means you can charge to 70% in just 30 minutes. The rest of the design though is just nothing special. You get a 4-camera setup on the back, and then you get those 2 cameras that are on the front display as well, but they annoyingly use that pill-shaped cutout. I'm not really a fan of that pill-shaped cutout and would much rather have a single lens than just have the hole punch. That display though is a 6.4-inch 1080p display. And it's a pretty good display. I think it's a perfect size. You can use it one-handed as well, which is something that I really want in a phone. While we're talking about that display though, this is a good display. It's not great, but it's good. Sometimes the viewing angles are not the best, so if you're not looking at this phone directly and looking at it from just a bit of an angle, you get this weird green tint which isn't great. There's also a bit of a brightness issue as well, so if you're outside and it's a really bright day, auto brightness just doesn't know what to do, so it's just a little bit too dim, which is again another thing which is a bit of a disappointment. There is something that I really like on this Nord though, and that's on the right hand side and that volume slider. It's quick, really easy, and it's just quite nice to switch between ring, vibrate, and silent. And it's got a really nice texture on it as well, which means it's nice and easy to actually switch between those 3 modes. And also, it's just like weirdly satisfying. Something that isn't satisfying on the Nord though are those speakers. And when I say speakers, I mean speaker, because it only has one single speaker. And that's on that bottom left-hand side of the phone. And it's not stereo at any point either, because that speaker that is on the top of the phone, that doesn't help. And as it's a single speaker at the bottom, it's a little bit tinny, it doesn't sound great, so it's not fantastic. The other problem that you get when you have a single speaker on a phone, and especially where it's positioned, is that it's really easy to cover up the sound. And it's not something that's happened loads, but it's happened just enough to be a little bit annoying. We should talk about the camera though on the Nord, and I've been really surprised by the photos that this camera can take. I think that 48 megapixel main camera and then that 12 megapixel ultra wide takes some seriously good shots, and especially for the price. I'm not sure if they beat the iPhone SE or the Pixel 4a, but they are good photos. When you look at these photos on a bigger and a bit of a better screen, the one thing that I kind of pick out from this is they're not as sharp as they could be. So I think that's what lets the pictures down a little bit on the Nord. But honestly, there's not a huge amount of complaints to have on this phone. The photos for most people are going to be good. You also have Nightscape as well on the camera, which is OnePlus's version of Night Sight, and to be honest, it's not anywhere near as good as Night Sight. It works better than taking photos in complete darkness, but I think that it could do with some work. When we talk about the video though on the Nord, it can do 4K at 30 frames a second and then 240 frames a second at 1080p. The 4K 30 genuinely looks really good. You can see the stabilization is pretty nice on it. It struggles a little bit when it's really sunny, just trying to expose things properly, but I think on a £400 phone at that 4K, you can't really complain. The 1080p 240 frames a second video is fine, but you need to be somewhere that's really well lit. So anything with a bit of a shadow or darkness, it's not going to work, but you can see that it comes out all right. The on-screen fingerprint reader is how you unlock the Nord. So you get either the passcode option or you get the fingerprint reader. And the one thing that I'm a little bit surprised with is that this is actually really good. And I'd say 90% of the time it gets your fingerprint right first try. It's pretty quick and responsive as well, but the only downside to having this fingerprint reader is that it's optical, so it needs to have that flash of light to make sure it can scan your fingerprint right. So at night when it's really dark and you're in bed, that flash of light is just a little bit too bright. Other parts of this phone though, for like daily usage, I think are really good. I don't think anyone's going to have any complaints. There's nothing that makes this phone seem slow except when you open that camera. So opening the camera can lag a little bit and can take a bit of time, but besides that, there's not many complaints with it. The battery though is a little bit hit and miss, especially because you have that 90Hz display. So sometimes it can be really good, sometimes it's a little bit poor. It kind of depends what you're doing. But if you're using this phone for, like, let's say a normal person who works a job and isn't on it every single day, then I think it'll be fine. Oxygen OS is actually pretty good. I prefer it way more than some other stuff like Samsung's One UI, for example. The 8GB of RAM make it feel really snappy, fluid, everything is pretty quick, and everything that you need to find really isn't difficult to find with Oxygen OS. I do have one main issue with Oxygen OS though. As good as it is, this lets it down, that there is no quick toggle to change the phone to dark mode. You can't quickly press a button to change it dark. You can't schedule it to change it dark. The only way to do it is to go into the settings and change the theme to dark mode, and that's not good. I think now that's a pretty big thing where it should 100% be one click away rather than settings, themes, and then change it each time. One of the things that does set the Nord apart though from some of those other mid-range devices is that it already has 5G. I'd never used 5G on a phone before I tried the Nord, and I actually don't think it's a massive deal breaker. The speeds that you can get if you're in a 5G area are probably quicker than some home broadband, but going through Twitter, Instagram, watching videos and stuff, I just don't think you can see a massive speed difference between 4G and 5G. Everything loads just as quick as it does on 4G, but I suppose the nice thing about the Nord is that you do have 5G already, so it is a bit of a plus, but also I don't think that you should let the 5G not being on the other phones sway your decision on getting the Nord. When you pick up the OnePlus Nord though, I think you should remember that OnePlus only offer two software updates, well, two major software updates, and that'll take you up to Android 13. And then OnePlus say that they will offer 3 years of security updates as well. And I think for that price, I think that is pretty decent. There is no official water resistance or IP rating on the OnePlus Nord, so a drop into the toilet or bath will most likely kill it. It does have some rubber seals though around the SIM card tray, but that's just for maybe like little splashes or spills, but anything where it's submerged is most likely going to kill it. The thing with the OnePlus Nord is that it was never meant to be this massively big, exciting phone. It was OnePlus going back to their roots. It was never going to outperform something that's like 2 or 3 times the price. But I think unless you're coming from a flagship phone over to the OnePlus Nord, I don't think you'd miss any of the features that a flagship phone would have, because the OnePlus Nord pretty much has everything. The OnePlus can take really good photos. It's quick, it's snappy, it's got a 90Hz display, the battery is good. Everything about this phone is good. It offers you pretty much everything that you would get on a flagship, but for way less of a price. It's pretty normal now for phones to cost over £1,000, but I think it's time to reconsider whether you actually need to spend that much money on a phone. And if not, then there's the OnePlus Nord.